All right. Welcome back to Unit 2. Even as we continue to discuss issues pertaining to human values, ethics, and professionalism. So far, what we have looked at, we ran through what ethics is all about. We discussed issues to do with what is professional ethics. And we also looked at issues to do with human values. And we started establishing what are some of these human values that may actually be considered even as we run through in teacher professionalism. So it's very, very important for us to understand that these human values are actually very, very important for each one of us to realize, so that now, even as we get into our professions, right? Even as we get into our professions, we will have an understanding of what it is that we need to do with the lives that we have been entrusted, all right, in terms of the students, and also how we're going to relate ourselves with our colleagues, with the environment in which we are, the community, the parents, to the clients that we have. So today we continue, even as we look at self-respect as one of the virtues. We remember we looked at commitment and many other virtues that are there. So as we continue, we look at self-respect. What is self-respect? Now, this is part 4 of our series. Now, self-respect is simply the characteristics of a person to be able to value him or herself in a morally varied method, right? Now, it's not a single method. There may be many methods in which an individual will value himself in a moral way. So what type of characteristics, how do you show your moral attribute as a person? So it is said that while self-respect and self-esteem tend to generally be used as synonymous, in a synonymous manner, when we talk about self-respect, this is actually a moral concept, where self-esteem, as we saw it earlier on, is actually a psychological concept, which signifies having a positive attitude towards oneself. Now, self-respect is slightly different from self-confidence, one component that we already looked at in a nutshell. So we will notice here that the former, which is self-confidence, involves more of self-assessment, while, the latter emphasizes on the awareness of the self-possessing abilities, right? So when we talk about self-respect, we're talking about you having a self-assessment of yourself, examining yourself. And while when we talk about self-confidence, we're talking about establishing an awareness of the self-possession of the abilities that may you actually have as an individual. Now, self-respect can have 2 components. These are recognition and also appraisal. Now, by recognition here, in relation to self-respect, is meant showing you be able to show equal respect to others as individuals, and also respecting their rights as much as we want our rights also to be respected. And this also tends to be, a biblical principle: do unto others what you want them to do for you, right? Secondly, when we talk about self-respect, we're talking about, another component is appraisal. This is meant being able to evaluate ourselves based on how the moral issues are actually faced in the environment in which we are. The other virtue is self-confidence. Self-confidence is an attitude, by implication. This attitude that allows individuals to have positive and yet realistic views of themselves and the situations in which they are actually found. So individuals trust their own abilities. They have a general control over their way of living. And they believe that within reason, they would be able to do what they wish, plan, and expect to do. So self-confidence actually strengthens one's moral stability. And it will, in one way or the other, be able to give you willpower for the successful achievement of any task that you want to pursue. Not only any task, but even motivation to be able to move in the right direction. Right? That's self-confidence. And teachers need to be self-confident of themselves in all means possible. So the development of self-confidence in each individual, okay, is largely dependent mostly upon the parental attitude, particularly in early childhood. By implication, ladies and gentlemen, is meant here that an attribute, a virtue of self-confidence may largely be dependent on our orientation. Now, this suggests that it's very, very important for us, especially parents, teachers, to be able to identify and also push students to be confident of themselves in all activities that they actually do. It's very, very important for us to note that. So we should be able to create that confidence in them, because sometimes people don't believe in themselves. So if the parents keep encouraging the child's moves towards self-reliance and correct or guide the child when a mistake is done without scolding that particular child, be rest assured that the child will develop self-confidence. Ultimately, the child will grow into a very, very successful person because he has meant to believe in himself, because he has been corrected and he knows what it is that he needs to do. Now, on the other hand, if you as a parent keep on scolding your child, even when he's not doing fine, you are down, you are what and what, for him, each and every action that he does, you lose focus and try to scold him. That child, be rest assured, will lose his self-confidence. Ultimately, he will grow into an introvert. And when the child grows an introvert, you have comprehension, you have apprehensions that whatever he or she does or says would only be criticized by others, because this is what has been used by the parents. So the inner friend circles, the teachers or other people close to a person too, all these play a vital role in developing self-confidence. So don't scold your children in classroom. Don't scold your children in your homes. Nevertheless, we need to mention here from the outset that lack of self-confidence is not necessarily related to lack of ability, right? So a constant guidance from committed persons, close to children, close to in a school situation, you, the teacher, you must be a committed guider to these children, so that you can help them to develop this confidence, self-confidence that is required of them. So the people with self-confidence have several characteristics that we can mention here. Among them, when people are self-confident, they have a self-assured standing. They do not depend on others. They are willing to listen, to learn from others, and they also adopt easily to situations. They are flexible, and also they are quite frank to speak the truth, because they are self-confident. They don't fear anything. They also respect others' efforts, and they also give due credit to whatever success that other people may actually be engaged in, right? Now, Since we have discovered that self-confidence is good, is actually an important ingredient, is important virtue that you as teachers must actually have and also employ, right? And inculcate in the learners. What are some of the factors that we may actually discuss for the development of self-confidence? Because remember, self-confidence can actually be developed. Now, among the factors are that childhood life and parental care are very, very vital, right? Then purposive objectives and targets, target well, set them well after good foresight and also planning. You must plan for these activities. Constant plans and commitment for the execution of the task, right? So when you have planned, even in your lesson plan, plan sometimes activities that would create self-confidence on the part of the learner, not expecting too much of approval or consent from others, all right? That's another factor. Body character and the determined approach to solve problems, right? This is being fearless. Proactive attitude to assess the reasons for mistakes and also for failure. When you have failed, when you have succeeded, when you have made a mistake, you must have a positive attitude to assess, how did I get wrong? Where did I get wrong? And what is it that I should do for this? Failure should be considered as a stepping stone for success in order for you to be self-confident. Flexible attitude and temperament in dealing with others is another factor. Modest without being a show-off to others, right? Well-structured communication and mutual exchange of views, right? Beneficial association with people of moral values. And this is very, very vital. Sometimes when you interact with people who are not self-confident, you also tend to lose that side, right? So not reading to unhealthy comments from others, but taking them in a positive and proactive attitude, even when they are negative. Don't react to them. Being committed for the upliftment of society or the organization to which you belong. In your case, you belong to the teaching fraternity. So be committed to that, right? The other virtue that we have to discuss is modesty, another biblical aspect. Now, the self-confidence that we have discussed earlier should not lead one to be arrogant. You're being confident, you're being self-confident must not lead you to being an arrogant person. Now, so you as an individual, you should be able to humble yourself, and you should not actually be a show-off person. Now, the Oxford Dictionary defines modesty as having a humble way of one's abilities and achievement. Even when you have a bachelor's in your family and the rest of the people who dropped out of school, be humble. That is what we mean by modest. I know that in some schools, people boast about having masters, about this and this and this, right? It's quite very dangerous. So you must humble yourself for the abilities and the achievements that you have. That's being modest. Now, the synonyms of modest include diffidence, humbleness, inconspicuous, plain, being simple, and assuming. All these are terms that are actually synonymous to modest. Another virtue that is very, very important to you as a teacher is generosity, right? This is another human value. Now, generosity is this expression of kindness to others. It is the virtue of freely giving to others more than you expect them to do. And mind you, this is what makes teaching a noble profession, because there is more that we offer to society than what we get. So also, generosity has terms that are synonymous for it, for being generous. There are terms such as benevolence, big-hearted. You have heard people say, that man is big-hearted, right? It means that he's generous, charitable, right? Forgiving, liberal, magnanimous, philanthropic, philanthropic, and also open-handed. All these are terms that are synonymous to generosity. What about responsibility? All right. Now, this is another virtue that is quite important for you as a teacher. Now, responsibility is that characteristic of a person where, you attribute a moral virtue within yourself. What do we mean by this? This is meant, it is where you are actually interested in doing right things at the right time, right? You do your duties with care and effort, right? You meet your obligations with great care. If you have to mark assignment, if you have to teach at a particular period, you actually teach, you carry out your duties with due consideration for others, right? So these are meant these are items that that can help you understand what responsibility is all about. Now, there is what we call the sense of responsibility. Sometimes maybe even you yourself, your head teacher at one point would have said, that teacher has no sense of responsibility. What do you mean by this? Now, in practical application, the term responsibility can be said to have 5 meanings. What are these 5 meanings? Among them is commitment. And we have explained what commitment is in our previous discussion. Another way by which we can practically apply responsibility is an obligation, right? When you have an obligation to do something, a moral responsibility. By this we mean you are morally obliged to do your duties, whether as a profession, as a socially committed, to society person, or as a person being obliged to pay the school fees of your children. That's your obligation. Another aspect in which the sense of responsibility is meant is moral capacity. By saying a person has moral capacities to act in a responsible manner, we mean your moral autonomy has been developed to post-conventional level as authorized by Kohlberg, even as we talk about the theories of morality. Another meaning of the 5 in terms of the senses of responsibility has to do with accountability. Now, but we will discuss this aspect of accountability later in one other unit. But we need to mention from the onset that by saying a person is accountable, we mean he is ready to accept his responsibility for all his actions and is ready to subject himself to assessment. If there's a problem in a classroom situation, even if you are not there, but the problem is as a result of some hitch that you actually overlooked as a teacher, you must be accountable for that. And then praiseworthy. By saying a person is responsible, we mean his praiseworthiness, the person's responsiveness during both the success days and also the failure days of his product, right? So this is an indication of his actual responsibility. So those are the 5 meanings by which we can attribute what a sense of responsibility entails. Now, sometimes even when we have these senses of responsibility, our senses of responsibility may be in conflict or in harmony with the legal aspects in our places of work. Now, as we illustrated, in regard to the responsibility of causing harm, we can actually distinguish the motives. Among them, sometimes they are intentionally causing harm, knowing and deliberately cause harm. And one example that comes in is the issue of corporal punishment, where a child, yes, may have offended, may have done something wrong, but some corporal punishment that teachers administer are too harsh to an extent that sometimes we tend to intentionally cause harm to these. That even when we are actually responsible for a moral attribute that we want to generate from the child, it may fight against the legal aspect of our work, right? So we need to be careful with that. Then reckless causing harm, not aiming to cause harm, but acting in a conscious awareness that the harm is likely to result. Sometimes we may be engaged in a scenario where even if you didn't want to cause harm, but the harm may be there, right? Imagine you were just joking to a child. You say, but you child, you are foolish. And then the child starts crying and goes and report, even when you are just joking as a teacher. So you didn't aim to embarrass that child, but the child took it out of context. That's reckless causing harm, something that you can actually avoid. Negligently causing harm, where not knowingly you cause harm, but you fail to exercise due care. And these are issues that actually happen in a classroom. Sometimes you involve yourself in these activities, even unintentionally, that you actually meant well, but because of some aspects, you may be legally bound to accept that you are actually wrong. What are some of the impediments to appreciation of responsibilities? Now, even when we talk about responsibility, there are some impediments to how we can actually appreciate the senses of responsibility. Among them, self-interest. Remember we talked about self-interest earlier on, with a concern for satisfying one's own interest, even at the cost of others. That can be an impediment, a barrier to responsibility. Egoism, where you unwillingly accept your faults, right? Fear of loss of a job or importance, all right? Self-deception. This is where you betray a willful lack of self-understanding, saying that everyone else does this mistake without being made liable. So why shouldn't you, right? Ignorance of vital information, though it cannot be treated as an excuse. You cannot say, I was ignorant of this. Sometimes you may be liable. Misinterpretation due to limited perspectives, similar to the acts of children. And this is why, as teachers, we need to read, especially documents that pertain to our profession, because sometimes you land into trouble over something that you did not know existed, right? So another impediment is microscopic vision, which is like, earlier mentioned, but exhibited even in the grown-ups. This is a combination of ignorance and misinterpretation, where we say, okay, I was ignorant, I didn't know about it, and then it's misinterpreted. You have remember, ignorance has no defense, that's what they say. So this can also be termed as mindset or wood-headedness, right? Another impediment is uncritical acceptance of decisions, especially when there can be no one else to comment or offer advice on what your decisions should be. Groupthink is another impediment, right? Even though this is an opposite to what is as stated. But sometimes, groupthink provides the needed moderation, where we say, okay, two heads are better than one. Now, this groupthink sometimes make groups come into agreement at the cost of critical thinking. You have noted even in school, sometimes as teachers, you want to agree over a decision. You want to come up with the decision against the head teachers, even when you know that it is wrong, but as long as it works well with you, right? That is when most of the group does not want to spend time and energy in analyzing and thinking. As long as someone would have said something and then you all agree and you want to believe that that is actually true, right? Now, Alvin Jennings, in his book, Groupthink, identifies symptoms of groupthink as follows. This is what he says. He talks about illusion of morality. This, which actually assumes the inherent morality of the group, thereby discouraging critical examination of the moral implication of what the group does or actually thinks. I want to mention here that we need to be very careful with groupthink. Don't move with the wind, right? Then he also talks about a tendency of individual members towards self-censorship, resulting from a desire not to rock the boat. He also talks about an illusion of invulnerability of the group to failure, where the group, even as teachers, you see, if we don't agree over this one, even if it's a negative notion, we will fail. Most of us will be transferred if you don't do this and this and this. That could actually lead to dangerous decisions by administrators, right? Another aspect has to do with a strong we feeling. Now, that views outsiders as enemies or aliens. And by outsiders here is meant those people that are not in agreement with the notions, with the decisions that we have made as a group. Rationalization of mindset that tends to shift responsibility to other persons. And we always find ourselves in this situation where you want to paint people black even over the mistake that you have done. In application of direct pressure, pressure on those who show signs of a disagreement, often exercised by the group leader, who in most cases intervenes to keep the group unified. Sometimes you may want to go on strike, even over a fringe charge, all right? And because one person has said, for me, I want to teach, and then you rise against that. And then mud guarding or protecting the group from outsiders who want to present dissenting views to the group is also one other aspect, right? So what are the challenges in the workplaces? I know that all of us in our workplaces, as teachers or something of that nature. What are some of these challenges that have been established to be found among in these workplaces? Now, the biggest workplace challenge is said to be the employees' work ethics. Your ethics as employees is one of the biggest workplace challenges. What are some of the issues that we discuss? Showing up to work every day, interest in work and attendance, showing up to work on time, punctuality. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Taking pride in the quality of our work. Sometimes we just want to do things because we were there on that particular day, right? Commitment to the job and getting along with others. All these are the work ethics that should actually be developed, but in which we find challenges too. So this situation demands inculcation of good character in the workplace by employees. So we must, even as we deal with these courses in our training sessions, we must be able to know that our training must be there to inculcate these good character, character development in the workplace, so that we may live and obey whatever is actually obeyable in a classroom, in a school system, right? Another aspect has to do with character. What is character? This is another virtue. Remember, we are still looking at virtues that we must develop as teachers that will, with time, extend to the learners that we actually teach. Now, the term character refers to the presence of all good human values. Not only all good human values, but also forms the basis for one's personality and one's credibility. So a person who is of high character have good human values. Those issues that we have been talking about from part 1 of unit 2, self-respect, commitment, responsibility, all those. And when you have all these good human values, then it will form a basis for your personality and your credibility. And when you have all these, then you are of good character. Now, the Oxford Dictionary defines character as the strength and the originality in a person's nature. And there are synonym terms to the word character. And these include having a good attitude, constitution, disposition, manner, temperament. All these are synonyms of the term, the term character. The other definition is the particular qualities that make a person or a thing different from another. And there are terms that are synonyms to this distinctiveness, when you are distinct from other persons: individuality, peculiarity, quality, stamp, and uniqueness. Remember, the Bible calls on Christians to be different from the world. In short, the Bible suggests in those terms, if we are talking about distinctiveness or peculiarity, the Bible then calls for Christians to be of good character, right? The other meanings not related to ethics are a person's role in a drama or a play or a printed or written letter or a symbol. Now, all the human values that constitute character are described more in the preceding lectures, as we call. Now, it is a characteristic property that defines the behavior of an individual. It is the pattern of those virtues that are morally desirable features. That's character. Now, character includes attributes that determine a person's moral and ethical actions and responses. How do you respond to moral issues? We have heard of people who have said that one has a strong character. It's because he responds well to whatever situation actually that comes to him. It is also the ground in which morals and values blossom. And people are divided into several categories according to common tendencies, such as, ruthless individuals, aggressive individuals, and ambitious individuals, constricting individuals, selfishness, stinginess or cheerfulness, generosity and goodwill. All these categories have talked about character. Now, individuals, remember, they vary not only in the type of their character, but also in the degree in which their character is actually portrayed, right? So those whose lives are determined and directed by the prevailing habits, prevailing fashions, beliefs, attitudes, opinions of people, the values in society or in which they live, all these have at best a developed social as opposed to an individual character. Now, by this, we mean that character, therefore, is exhibited through conduct. The way we conduct ourselves says much about our character. So character is determined by the expectations of society. And that's why society is able to detect, to say, that person is of good character. It's because this is what they see in that human being as acceptable to that particular society. So there are many acts and many people who act and live within their norms, refusing to fall below the required social minimum, sometimes failing to rise above the maximum expected of a normal member of a particular group or particular society, right? And this is what actually develops character. On one extreme are those that, do not even conform to the minimum standards and fail to acquire the socially required behavior, attitudes, and values. Now, these individuals, in one sense, have an informed social character. At the end extreme are those whose beliefs, attitudes, and also values are determined internally by the strengths of their own conviction. So sometimes our characters are dependent on how we get convinced with situations. So these individuals have developed minds and formed characters of their own, which needs to be recommended, right? Now, character is the expression of the personality of a human being, and that it reveals itself in the way you conduct yourself as a human being. So in this sense, every human being has a character, including you and I. At the same time, only human beings, not animals, have character. The reason is very simple, is because character implies rationality. It implies reasoning. For you to be a person of good character, you must have reason capabilities of say, okay, if I do this, this is what will happen. And so this is how I should behave. Now, though in addition to this usage, the term character is also employed in a narrower sense as when we speak of a person of character in our day-to-day usage. Now, in this connotation, character implies certain unit of qualities with a recognizable degree of constant in mode of action. Now, when we get into psychology, psychology analyzes the elements of character to trace the laws of its growth. Where did it come from? To distinguish the chief agencies which contribute to the formation of different types of characters, and also to clarify and classify these. Now, a lot of psychologists, if you read through a lot on character, during the last 40 years have given a large quantity of acute observation on the topic of character. Because, you know, in politics, in schools, in workplaces, we need this. So it has actually created, it has actually been made a center of discussion. Still, these contributions do not actually constitute a science. We cannot simply say this is a science. So there are 10 commandments of character. I'll read them through as attributed to Joseph Teruskini, a Jewish rabbi, in his book, The 10 Commandments of Character. He actually outlines and indicates the following as essential characteristics of an ethical person. Among them, that you know your weaknesses. You know your weaknesses. Number 2, when ethics and other values conflict, he suggests choose ethics. Number 3, treat all people with kindness and with understanding that they, like you, are made in God's image. Commandment number 4, be fair. Commandment number 5, be courageous, right? Number 6, be honest. Commandment number 7, be grateful. Number 8, practice self-control. Number 9, exercise common sense. And number 10, commandment number 10 for character is admit when you have done wrong. Self-forgiveness. And don't rationalize bad behavior. Don't have reasons for doing bad, right? So basically, that's what we can talk about in Unit 2, Part 4 of our continuous series of human values, ethics, and professionalism. So join me in Part 4 of a series of this particular lecture, where now we are going to look at the 4 temperaments in Part 4 of our lecture, as it were. So I wish you well, and join me in the next lecture. Thank you so much.